So there we go. So timely preparation to start the discussion off with, being 508, the Equisetum. And I'm just going to show you, and if that's okay, just to kick things off, read some of the really good information in the Monty Walden English BD Biodynamic Gardening book, which I know I've shown before to people, because it's got lovely photos, nice simple layout. I'll do a quick flick through. And there's a couple of different ways here that they talk about doing, making the 508 Equisetum tea and also a ferment. And I've also got from my Lynette West's book, I've got a couple of different recipes from her. And for those that might be interested, how you can use the casuarina, the river she oak or the bull oak, as a substitute if you can't get hold of Equisetum, because in Australia especially, it has to be grown under license, and I'm pretty sure probably it's meant to be the same here in New Zealand, but there are one or two spots privately known to certain individuals where it can be found. So otherwise it is listed on the noxious weed category, because obviously it can get out of hand in watery kind of situations. So if I just, there's a couple of really good things to point out here, and I'll show you the picture again, but it's in this book, I'll just read this page. One of the easiest biodynamic preps to make is the silica-rich Equisetum avensa 508, as it is used to treat both the crops and the soil in which they grow. It is essentially a tea or liquid manure that is made from common horsetail and applied as a spray to prevent plants from being out-competed by weeds or damaged by noxious pests, rots, mildews, and other debilitating fungus disease organisms. Its unique qualities comes from a family of plants that predates the dinosaurs, thrives by shady riverbanks, ditches, and lakes where soil is damp and light is often poor. Most plants weaken and succumb to pests and diseases in dingy conditions, but the luminous fronds of Equisetum avensa contain the highest levels of silica in the plant kingdom, and it even reproduces from spores. It is the silica that makes the 508 sprays so effective by tightening crops and making them less appetizing for pests. And then there's a little note about which horsetail to use. Horsetail has a large extended family, so make sure you use the right one. If you cut into the stem, you'll find that the common horsetail looks square in a cross section, and all other horsetails look more hexagonal, and they are also toxic. There is a little diagram here. So like the lavenders, you want to look for the square stem, not the more hexagonal stem. How the 508 sprays work. Equisetum avensa is not the only silica-rich biodynamic preparation, but it works quite differently from horn silica 501. Both revolve around the idea that silica makes plants healthier, tastier, and longer lasting in storage, but horn silica 501 encourages upward movement and a connection with the celestial forces of light and heat. In Equisetum avensa 508 tea or liquid manure, the silica works downwards toward, using the brightening and drying effects to push disease organisms down, off or away from the crops and back into the soil where they belong. For maximum effect, apply 508 sprays a few days before new moon, because that is when plants inwardly contract anyway, naturally shielding themselves against pests and diseases. Recommendation that you collect the fronds and stems just before or at midsummer, when the concentration of silica is highest. You can use them immediately or keep them dry in airy shade until needed. They should retain their green colour and dry, firm, spiky feel. I'll just show you those photos again. So before we go into recipes and all sorts of things, anybody want to ask any questions, respond?
Do you have anything to add, Jeremy?
So midsummer harvest, because some guys here are using it as fresh and looking at doing it shortly, but talking with Dieter, he was saying sort of January being the best time.
You're a bit echoey, Jeremy. Sounds like both of you are down a tunnel.
What's happening there, James?
Yeah, you just have to accept that one, I think, Christine.
Okay. Yep. Carry on while he sorts it out.
I'll move further away.
Yeah, that's the problem. Have to isolate yourselves in different rooms.
Right.
So you were saying that Dieter recommended January, was that right? And then you...
Yeah, that's when he was doing most of his harvesting. Yeah, we've found, well, I've tried to aim around the here we go, like December type thing. So I know there's some of the guys.
Solstice.
Yeah, solstice, which I think is when longest day length, so you got the most potency and herbs and the likes. So I just transfer that across to that. But yeah, I know Cameron at Saracen's doing. He's looking at harvesting shortly, and he uses fresh rather than dried through the coming months.
Yeah, he's put together a really good recipe, which I'll share at some point as well, actually, because he couldn't be here tonight. So
right,
yeah. So just to let others know, you guys are vineyard extraordinaires, and so you're looking at using this on grapes, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we put our first one on last week. Oh, and you said new moon. I was thinking it was full moon from the watery aspect, but you were saying then new moon.
Yeah, that's what they're saying in the English book. The nets gives
It was
a bit
that
of
was based. So that was based on the plant drawing inwardly, and the 508 acting on the inwards or pushing back into the soil, the disease effect.
Yeah.
Whereas the full moon is the other right space for to calm the watery element. There's no right or wrong way around these teas, because the 508 is really just another plant tea, like we use willow teas and nettle teas and all the rest of it, in my mind.
Yeah.
It's just a plant that's known to have the highest silicous content. So
yeah, there's also a connection. I know. Oh, we've got 3 more people popping in. Hang on a sec. How do I get into them? Yeah, carry on talking while I do this.
you're just very lucky, Jeremy, to have access to it. That secret spot.
It is good.
So.
Recording in progress.
James. Oh, now I'm going to echo again.
Tell him to come and sit next to you, Jeremy. Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Or go and sit next to him, one or the other. Hi, Deborah. It looks like you've popped in twice, so let me just see if I can get rid of. Hi, Bridget.
Oh, sorry, I'm late. I thought it was 7 o'clock.
Yeah, we were just discussing that.
Just trying to delete the other one, sorry.
All right, let's try. Can you do that, or
Just trying.
Joys of technology, eh? Gosh.
Is it all echoey now?
Yeah, I couldn't find the link, so I tried my phone and now I've got both of them. So hang on a minute.
So as a practitioner to it, Jeremy, what would you consider the best time?
I've been going there just before the full moon,
The full moon, yeah.
3 to 4 days, and doing a soil application at that point. Yeah, it was sort of like a broadcast, so we're getting some on the vines, but focusing on the soil.
Yeah. So like spreading it like 500.
Well,
Okay.
yes, I just sprayed
An actual
straight out.
spray. An actual spray, yeah.
Yeah.
I've removed you, Deborah, so it's all right.
Have you done it?
Yep.
Oh, good, because I couldn't find it. Right.
Yeah, just going back to also other places or other times to use it. Lynette talks about the difference between the perigee and the apogee as well, and obviously depending on what we're growing and where we are, you know, that's another rhythm that can be paid attention to, and of course I can't find the bit that I'm looking for.
But the whole idea is that the Equisetum pulls the watery element back into the etheric.
Yes.
So therefore, when we had full moon and perigee last week, was admittedly at springtime, it was the ultimate time to be applying that.
Yes.
And recognizing the fact that of the 3 kingdoms, Equisetum represents the plant form of silica, and diatomaceous earth is the animal, and 501 is a mineral. So to keep the 3 kingdoms balanced, this is where the Equisetum with the Casuarina comes into it.
James, could you elaborate? Could you just repeat that? It pulls the watery element back into the etheric. What does that mean?
Well, at full moon, the water is coming out of, the moisture is coming out of the soil, and therefore enhancing the incidence of fungal activity. And apparently by spraying the Equisetum horizontally over the soil at about 1 to 2 meters, it's supposed to dry the rising moisture out from the lunar force and bring it back into the etheric. Am I using the right word by using etheric?
Yes, yeah, you are.
What do you mean? How do you mean back into the etheric? That's the bit I don't get.
Well, sucking it back into the dirt.
Oh, okay.
Pushing it down.
Well, no, pulling it down.
Yeah.
Pulling it
Okay.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's quite important. That's an interesting little thing. Are you pushing it down or are you pulling it down? And this is the whole thing between breathing in and breathing out, and centripetal and centrifugal.
Gotcha.
Understanding that we're dealing with moisture, earth and water, or air and light on the other side.
Rice moisture up.
I've been getting a lot of brown rot in my apricots and plums, and I just spray it a lot when I see the brown rot in the fruit. But I guess I should be doing precautionary stuff like now.
Yeah. Should be doing it prior.
Well, there's always good, and then there's the I've got time or I've become aware.
Yes, but this is where the calendar gives you that window of opportunity, so that you're being proactive and you're dealing with the cause, not the effect. And the brown rot on your plums, you're seeing the effect, and that's a bit too late. Got to get in there before that. By looking at the calendar and seeing when the optimum times are.
Yeah.
What
I did put it in my tree paste as well.
Mate, look, honestly, the only way to bring harmony into this climate change is with the use of Equisetum or Casuarina or all that sort of stuff. You know, it's going to bring rhythm into the vortex of the water. It's just going to, in this region where Jeremy and I live down here in Marlborough, and Jeremy was a person who found the Equisetum growing on the side of the river, for goodness sake. And yet all the old veterans, when we were saying to them, where do you get the Equisetum from? Because it used to be in the Whanganui River on the west coast, and it was a secret. And then they said we had to go into the mountains to find the Equisetum there. And yet goodness me, it was just growing 2 kilometers away from where we were. And we went down there, golly, 3 weeks ago to try and see how it was growing. And you couldn't see it until finally you recognized it, and blow me down, there was Equisetum growing everywhere. It's just little small stuff.
The male sporulating ones.
Yeah, it was incredible. And you tip them, like that, and the spores, we go, oh, it was the best botanical visit we'd ever made. No,
sure
true.
Rafa really loved that as well.
They make
Until
it
the
taste like
Marlborough Council
asparagus too.
worked out.
So, Gita, was that you asking about questioning me about pulling it into the etheric?
Yes, it was the term etheric, and it was just a bit vague. So you mean pulling it down into the living earth?
Yes. How does that make sense to you?
No, not really.
Could you explain it?
Mainly because I've heard completely different explanations, and it doesn't really square with other things that I've heard.
So please
Well,
elaborate.
Could you explain, Gita?
Okay, so the other explanation I've heard is that at full moon, the lunar forces are very strong, pulling the moisture up the plant, and the Equisetum interferes with the water in the soil's ability to mediate the lunar influence. So the lunar influence comes strongly into the soil where there's lots of water, especially before the full moon and especially after rain. And then the Equisetum prevents the lunar forces being mediated from the water into the plant or into the soil. I can actually give you a Steiner quote on that. He says, "Now the moon influences in the soil can become too strong. You need only call to mind a thoroughly wet winter followed by a thoroughly wet spring. Then the moon forces will enter too strongly. The earth will become too much alive. We must somehow relieve the earth of the excess lunar forces in it. We need only perceive what works in the earth so as to deprive the water of its power as a mediator, so that it does not take up an excess of lunar forces through the water it contains."
So is that from the agriculture lectures, Gita?
Yes, it is. That's lecture 6.
Cool. So if anybody wants to read up on that, that's your go-to link there.
So that kind of contradicts the whole idea of the downward forces. It's talking more about depriving water of its power as a mediator. So that the
It's one and the same. It's actually one and the same.
Well, if you interpret them both the same, then they are the same. To me, they seem a bit different.
Well, it's sucking it in.
Pardon, James?
It's sucking it in. The Equisetum is sucking back into the etheric, the moisture.
Yeah, that's different from depriving water of its power as a mediator.
It's one and the same.
Anyway, moving on.
But the point is that from a fungal point of view, that if we were looking at the rot in our plums or whatever, and we could be applying a tea of Equisetum, a 10% solution of Equisetum tea, and a teaspoon of diatomaceous earth, and followed up the next morning by 5:01, honestly, things are going to be shining the day after. The fungus won't be taking the invasive effect.
And the reason for adding the diatomaceous earth, James?
To bring in the animal kingdom.
Okay, can you say a bit more about that?
Diatomaceous earth is a unicellular exoskeleton of tiny diatoms that have fallen to the bottom of the sea. They are mostly about 88% silica. It's a crustacea, and I think that, well, okay, to try and balance the kingdoms and the whole process of it, animal, plant, and mineral. So in this instance, that if we're going to be spraying 501 at moon opposition Saturn, there is a chance that we can enhance that with this climate change that's happening, and the weather parameter that is coming about. We can mostly strengthen, and I'm just visualizing this, we can strengthen this ability to form not the skeletal like the calcium, but we're trying to enhance the silica polarity like the skin of the plant.
Yeah, and that probably reflects a bit to the way, you know, horsetail or silica strengthens our hair and nails and so forth. So there's a kind of strengthening of the skin, the hair, the nails, but without hardening it too much, and also not drying it out too much, but containing it.
Well, the interesting thing intermediary is bentonite, which brings the calcium and the silica together. Sorry, I'm getting carried away here, Jeremy.
Oh, that's all good.
But the bentonite is the body that holds the silica in here and the calcium here. And this is where, you know, again, bentonite and kaolin and stuff like that is the moisturizer that you put on the skin of the silica on the outside of the bones.
And so in terms of grapes and, you know, or other fruits, you know, that are needing protection, shall we say, or strengthening inwardly and outwardly, then that would help with that. Would that be correct?
Yeah, well, in terms of in terms of making a connection from the cation, the anion situation of the silica and the bentonite and the calcium. Yes, I do think so.
So botrytis, is that what it's called? Yeah, on grapes or other
Well,
plants.
the brown rot that Jan has on her plums, you know, it's the same fungal situation, too much lunar forces.
So I put all those diatomaceous earth and bentonite clay into my tree paste and put it all over the trunks in the winter. So I hope that's going to help a lot too.
Yeah. You think if you're a crusty little crawling insect crawling up the trunk of your tree, and you're going along this pathway, a super highway, and it's got bentonite and diatomaceous earth, it's going to be the sharpest, most dangerous highway for this crawling insect to get up, because that stuff's going to get into the exoskeleton of it, and it'll lose all its moisture and not get up onto the leaves and start chewing on the leaves.
What about the spiders, though?
What's the one?
What about the spiders, the good insects?
Spiders have got long legs and they don't have an unicellular exoskeleton.
Oh, so they can make it over the
I never asked one really, but I'm pretty sure they can.
Can you do that and get back to us, please?
Yeah. The spiders have got long legs and they go along like that, whereas the caterpillars going along like that, or the beetles are going along like that.
Maybe.
What do you think?
I think not. I thought that the diatomaceous earth was, you know, I thought that the diatomaceous earth was a just killed everything that touched it insect wise.
Well, it's very crystalline.
So any questions from anybody? Because there's some great information coming out here. Deborah, you want to?
Yeah. This is Rachel's Equisetum that I've got. You know, it's got the little like thin little strands on it.
The spiky leaves.
Yeah. And I used to have a big bush of it, like with these on it at my old place, but the one that I've got growing at the moment now, it doesn't have any of those little bits on it. It's just like a shoot with the different, like, you know, colors of the dark going up it with none of them growing off it. And I've got quite a bit growing now of those. Can you use those like those long cylindry bits and not just without having this little, you know what I mean?
I think that is that just recently you've seen those?
No, I planted it about 3 years ago, and I just had the one, and now I've got lots sort of like this big and bigger popping up all over.
So it's like a jointed rush.
Yeah, it's like it's got, you know, the joints in it with the dark,
Yeah.
you know, the
Jointed
jointed up.
rushes.
Yeah, is that still Equisetum?
A VCI?
Has it got the square stem or has it got a hexagonal stem?
You keep talking. I'm going to go. I've got one in the studio. I can't see that. I'm just going to go and grab one in the studio because I would like to know, because I was about to chop it up and see if I could use it. So carry on and I'll be back in a bit.
No.
It's
Any-
really good information and good
Yep.
stuff to learn.
Anyone else got any questions?
Mm.
Anyone have any? Go ahead, James.
I wanted to say that here in Marlborough, and going out with Jeremy to the river and seeing the abundance of Equisetum there, and in the paddock beside the river, the man was growing oats, and of course this Equisetum was a invading weed of which he would love to get rid of. I'd hate to think what he was going to spray on it. And I thought, my goodness me, and this would have been 3-4 hectares. And I thought, my goodness me, if we could convince this man to grow 4 hectares of Equisetum, bearing in mind that the council sees it as a noxious weed and wants to kill it, if we could grow 4 hectares of Equisetum and bale it and convince people to go and make a tea out of it and spray it out there, wouldn't the world be a better place?
Mm.
Would it or not? Am I just being a dreamer, or how it's powerful, this Equisetum?
Well, it is, but then, it's also that thing is, too much a good thing, because it does, obviously, you don't need a lot, and it does
Less is more.
Increase its capacity to spread its energy around the more you use it. And I would imagine it's probably like anything. There's a cut-off point where it would stop being helpful and might actually become the opposite.
Well, yeah, okay. in that instance, then that
Just
you
make
know,
more
this
tea.
this is a problem. This is a problem we have biodynamically, is to try and, we're not here to be pilgrims or evangelical or stuff like that, but the problem is to try and get people to convince them that they've got to stop applying the chemicals, and that there is a balance that we can have, and from a metaphysical point of view, from a psychological point of view, oh gosh, it makes me so excited, but we just can't make people think like that.
James, do you think, like I notice my daughter lives on a conventional dairy farm, but do you think it might help using Equisetum to stop like foot rot?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, on their dairy
Absolutely,
farm, tell them
yes.
to go down the bottom of the paddock to where the drain is, and they'll find Equisetum growing there most probably anyway. Mother Nature put it there especially for that.
Yes, I have noticed, like you've got 2 slopes coming down and there's the watery bit in the bottom. There, it looks like Equisetum growing there. I must harvest it and snip it and see if it's the correct one.
Tanya, you had a question?
Oh, Deborah's come back with her piece of Equisetum. Let's have a look and then I'll...
Right.
Oh, that looks humongous.
Yeah, but I had this growing like this before, and then it had there's little tiny bits coming out of it, but I don't know. So I asked a herbalist, did she have some? And she said, yes, I've got some there, and she gave me a root of it. But is this still Equisetum?
It's not a bonsai though.
Yeah,
It's not the horsetail.
Oh, that's a shame, because it's growing up everywhere now. Eek. I thought I was going to have an abundance.
Yeah,
So no go.
Hey, Christine.
Yeah.
Christine.
Yep.
Do you think Jeremy could tell us how he prepares his Equisetum for spraying?
Absolutely.
That'd be
Absolutely.
a really good idea. And then, we can start sharing some recipes and so forth. So go for it, Jeremy.
All right. Well, first we used, before we discovered the source, I've read that Harvest magazine a few years ago with the Casarina, with the Australian one. So we did a cold ferment tea out of that, but that was more for hyphal growth of roots, mycorrhizal type side of things. So there was a soil application that we did there. But yeah, more recently last year was the first year we've done it as a full program. The September, October, November, and December prior to full moons, and we had our best year ever from powdery and downy mildew control side of things. So we're doing it, what they say, prophylactically or prior to, and we use 25 grams dried per litre of water. So we've got at the moment just got an 8 litre pot that we put in 200 grams of dried Equisetum and boil for anywhere from half an hour to an hour, depending on when we take it off. And then we apply that, and then we leave that steeping overnight, and then the following day we'll drain that off and use 6 litres into a wine barrel with 100, so made up to 150 litres. Stir that for around 20 minutes, and then apply horizontally off. It would be about 1.5 meters off the ground, so it's going over the top of the vines with stuff dropping onto the vines, but mainly onto the soil on either side. And depending on what pressure, we've got areas in hollows that are more high pressure, so we'll do every second row through those, and other areas of the vineyard we'll just do every 4th row. So it roughly works out to, I think, around 100 litres of water per hectare.
And you do use a fine sprayer to put it out? Yeah,
the same one we use with 501. But yeah, instead of going straight up, we're going straight out.
Deborah?
And yeah, a few last 2 years ago, we did have an infection, and so we used later in the season.
An infection of what?
Downy mildew.
Right.
Just a light one, so we applied it straight onto the vines to try and dry that out. And that's certainly, we only did a small area, but you could see at post harvest the leaf stayed on those vines.
Really?
Quite a bit later into the, probably 10 days later than the ones that we didn't spray.
And you sprayed in this instance the Equisetum onto the leaves, as you're saying, because you had downy mildew on the leaves.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and stuff I've read up about, if you're going to use it as a eradicant type aspect, then you've got to use much higher rating, concentration, and more, like they say, 3 back-to-back sprays.
Right. Afternoon or evening? Morning or afternoon?
Most of what we go from sunrise to midday type thing.
Yeah, morning seems to be recommended more than afternoon in lots of situations, but yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so if anybody wanted that particular ratio and wanted to write that down, can you just give that to us again, please?
25 grams dried per litre of water for making the tea concentrate. And then we dilute that down, I think it's 1 to 24 it works out to, would be. We're 6 litres into it, made up to 150 litres per barrel. And that roughly covers a hectare and a half.
Cool, thank you.
Would you say, add to that it could just be a 10% solution?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I looked at several publications and online type thing, and just that's an average of what I was looking at, really.
Yeah, well, I can pretty much confirm that from Lynette Westforth. She's was a New Zealand biodynamic person who did a really good biodynamic course in Australia and got biodynamics into Canberra University, and worked on a lot of big properties over there, and went to Highgate and taught Prince Charles and his manager how to use biodynamics and so forth. So you know, these are, I mean, what I learnt with her is for Australia, but I don't see that it would be much different. But she said to cover half an acre, add 20 grams of dried herbs to 1 litre of rainwater, bring to the boil, simmer for 20 minutes with the lid on. Let stand for 24 hours, strain and dilute with 18 litres of rainwater, and then stir for 20 minutes and apply immediately. So that's that one.
Can I give you-
Our New Zealand booklet on other biodynamic measures has got a dilution rate of 1 to 4. So it's got 1 litre of cooked up stuff to 4 litres of water.
25%.
25%.
Yeah, if I was doing it as a radicant, I'd be doing that. That was the type of concentrates we were using. Yeah. But prophylactically, they say much, and grass with nettle even goes D5 concentration.
Potentized.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay, up to D5.
Yeah.
And how much water would you dilute that in then? And what acreage would that cover?
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting. There's a guy, Ted Lemon, in California, and he's been working with, did a lot of initial work at Burn Cottage in Central Otago. And we would ask him about making teas and tisanes and stuff like that. And I thought it sounded interesting what he said. He said, when you make the tea, the amount that you put into it, the amount of substance you put into the hot water, is that when you taste it, and I think this is the crazy thing, when you taste it, it pleases you. And you have to sit there and go, that is incredible. Because, here we are making the Equisetum, as Jeremy is saying there, and if you taste it, and it works on your saliva, and it pleases you like a cup of tea, then it's good. Because it gives you the good intention and the positivity, and as to how it is to apply it, off you go.
Is that before or after you dilute it, James?
No, this is the tea, the concentrate.
The concentrate, thank you.
Yeah.
The last week when we did, or the week before, I think when we did our first application, there was a frost cold period predicted too, so we were adding valerian. Added some valerian into the barrel when we were stirring, and oh my goodness, the 2 of those together, the smell is just phenomenally good.
Who needs drugs? Just have
Well, no, who needs salad dressing?
Fantastic. Deborah, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was actually about when you said you boil it for half an hour, I think you said. And I was going to ask you, would you not bring it to the boil and then simmer it? Because that is what I've learned how you, and then also with the lid on makes a difference as well, because it's not evaporating, that's coming back down into the pot. So I think those 2 things are probably, I think you just said that, Christine, with what you said. So that was my question. If anyone ever gets a burn, make up the same thing and spray it on the burn on your skin. It's incredible. No scarring at all.
This is spraying on Equisetum, really?
It was Equisetum and Usnea off the tree, done the same way. And I had a massive big burn right down my thigh from a hot water bottle. And the skin was just like, you couldn't apply anything. And it was just like sheeted, like a whole sheet of skin had come off. And the herbalist told me to use those 2 things and spray it on the leg. And they couldn't believe it in the hospital. They thought I'd have to have a skin graft. So if you ever get a burn, I just leave some in the fridge because it's always handy to have. It's nice to drink too, but it really did work fantastically.
This is Aussie
Not a scar.
as in willow. Aussie as in willow.
Usnea off the tree, the usnea that grows on the tree, the lacy one.
Oh, okay.
Not the little closed one that's on the tree, but the one that looks like lace. It's beautiful.
Lichen you're talking about.
Lichen, It's called Usnea though, but that's the name they use for it. But it's a good handy remedy to have if you've got some. So there we go. Anyway,
That's good to know. There's another added benefit.
And
Anybody
it's
else
good to drink.
got any questions, Tanya?
Yeah, sorry to be late to the conversation. I was receiving instructions from my neighbour how to look after their garden in their absence. I am wondering, is this plant one? I understand coming in on the conversation, it's useful for fungal, for watery things. Is that right? So rust is a fungus, is it?
It is, yes.
But it seems to be a very dry, presenting fungus, doesn't it? Would this be a plant that would be useful in remedying rust in the garden?
This is like rust on garlic.
I've got rust everywhere.
Have you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So I get it, the garlic rust, but I understand I love hollyhocks and they seem to be vectors for rust. So on the hollyhocks, I get rust on celery, rust on silver beet.
Yeah, valerian can be helpful, but Equisetum could also be well worth trying, especially with at this time of year. I mean, it's worth a go. And I can go back to reading out Cameron's interesting brew that he mixes with willow. You might find that helpful as well. I'll have to just try and find that though. So keep talking while I.
Well, it's interesting with the rust because Andreas Velter over in Nelson has got this product called Oikon B, which is a mixture of fennel seed oil and Equisetum. And I have to tell you that seeing rust on bay trees, or as you're saying in celery and garlic, if you just put on a 1% solution of that, it's incredible. I'm not saying the rust goes away, but the rust is not there. And of course, if you put on CPP or 500 and stuff like that, there's even less incidence for rust to come onto, in this instance, garlic. Right. So fennel seed oil and Equisetum would be brilliant.
Fennel seed oil and what
or just fennel, you've got fennel growing in the garden right now and it's coming up to seed.
Yeah, no, I've got lots of fennel. It's not affected. It doesn't have rust.
No, mate, take that. Go and cut it, the seeds and the grass, and make your Equisetum, and get the water boiling. Add the Equisetum when the water comes down below 80 degrees. As it's take it off the heat, comes below 80 degrees. Then put your fennel in there, and you get this mixture of the two. Because what you extract out of fennel, the same as with willow, is the substances extracted below 80 degrees C.
Okay, so it needs to be like, let the water cool a little bit before you put the fennel in.
Yeah, it's the same with stinging nettle as well.
Okay.
What about 501? Like, do you use 501, Tanya?
Well, actually, I have to say I'm a bit terrified of 501. I regularly apply 500, twice a year, but and I have been thinking about 501, but I don't feel very confident about it.
I was just thinking about something I think it's in the BD calendar,
Right.
information about Nori having used 501 on a crop of zucchini and got them to produce for an incredibly long time, and they just never got that musty, moldy stuff that they usually get.
Powdery mildew is what they get.
The powdery mildew, that's
so
right.
I was thinking if your problem is quite widespread, maybe that's because that's more of a widespread sort of basic.
Yes, I'd say that it is a characteristic of my garden, having rust. I mean, some plants are impervious to rust, but those that are susceptible to rust, especially when I'm on Waiheke, so when things start to dry out and the plants start to stress, then the rust. But the rust is here early this year.
John Pierce, years ago in Kaipara, sprayed 501, and he had zucchinis just producing fruit for an extended period of time.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's just what I said. Said.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll kind of get brave with the 501.
So be brave and give it a try.
Okay. Thank you. It's helpful. I'll try.
Can I just ask before Tanya, your fear of 501, where does that fear come from?
This thing in the back of my head that you can burn things using the 501.
Jeremy, can you speak to that? Because I think Jeremy's had first-hand experience of this.
Oh, I don't know.
Early morning is better than afternoon, perhaps.
For sure, yeah. We do use it in the afternoon for tannin development and in the fruit close to February for March harvest type thing. But yeah, we're careful that we're not doing it on too hot a day, so keeping it below sort of 22 degrees. But yeah, I remember Monique coming to visit us after she'd been burnt 501 when she was down here at Churton, and she was red as a beetroot. I think she'd be out spraying it.
Sunburn, yes.
Yeah. And all of our stuff.
Glasses and a hat are always a good idea with 501.
Oh yeah, we tell our staff whenever we apply it to be careful and be extra vigilant, but they always end up burnt. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm interested that there seems to be this common perception that 501 burns things. I've never burnt anything with 501. I don't know where this is coming from.
It's my perception of this one, Gator, is actually the sunburn that, and I have had first-hand experience that for some unknown reason, the skin becomes more sensitive to the sun. But no, I have not seen any burn myself on plants. That's
Either.
the reason why I was getting this conversation was to get Tanya to realise that don't be fearful. You can't burn plants with 501.
Okay.
Yes, but when you spray 501 in the dawn, as the sun's coming up like this, and you have a look at the plant's leaves at 11 o'clock, and all the leaves have cupped up like this. You know, the points of the leaves have rising up to the sun. It's very luminous.
Yeah, indeed.
And in this instance, from a wine making point of view, when you're sprayed 501 and you make the wine from it in a year afterwards, the wine has got we call it luminosity. It's got a shine to it. It's got charm to the eye when you have a look at the glass of wine. And I think it would be the same with an apple, for example, that it's got when you look at the flesh of the apple, it's got what do we call it? It's got colour coming out of the flesh.
Luminescence.
Well, luminescence. It's a joy to the eye. So, you know, you think more about that apple than when you eat it. You look at it and go, oh, gosh, that's beautiful.
Sounds good. I'm just going to read Cameron's recipe here. So if you want to take this down. I use a 508 tea in most of my fungal sprays along with willow. I do a fermentation with Equisetum and hot rainwater. I allow it to soak and ferment until it tastes good. It's typically 3 to 4 days, depending on the outside temperatures. I do this in a 200 litre plastic drums that have the tops cut out. I find it helps to wash the Equisetum first because in Marlborough, it comes from the Wairau riverbed and it can become rather reductive if the river silt is not rinsed from the roots. I used 2 litres per 4,000 litre of spray. It is the same percentage as my willow and seaweed. I don't prep the Equisetum because my seaweed is prepped and is being used in the same spray. I think 508 does bring a drying component to the sprays, and I also appreciate the silica content of the tea. This particular tea can become very fungal and stinky after a couple of weeks, and I do wonder if this fungal life also helps to bring a different fungus versus the powdery mildew. None of this is scientifically tested, but a lot of the new biologicals that you can buy are more about adding biology versus killing biology, which is great.
I've got a question about that recipe.
Uh-huh.
What willows, what part of the willow is he using? And I have another question is about the first recipe that you gave about the Equisetum. I didn't fully hear that. Were you saying that you were using the same recipe with Casuarina?
Was that Jeremy talking about the Casuarina recipe?
Yes.
No, the Casuarina was quite different. We did a cold ferment, whereas the Equisetum we're just doing as a
See.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tea.
Yeah, tea.
So I would sort of imagine that the willow he's talking about is the leaves, unless anybody else thinks
The
differently.
shoots, it's the young shoots.
Yeah.
So that the springtime willow growth is the young shoots and the leaves is what has the highest salicylic acid concentration. And
Okay.
it's the salicylic acid in the willow shoot that is the active ingredient. A couple of aspirin, so it's the same thing.
But also the green bark is, I mean, just take the whole shoot and chop it up. But this is again where you have the Equisetum, and to get the salicylic acid out of the willow, it's got to be below 80 degrees.
Okay.
Yep.
Can I ask again about the Casuarina? Because I don't have any Equisetum here, so I've been using Casuarina, but I've been doing tisane with it, and I sprayed to spray them. But so you say cold ferments, is it like the same process of fermenting for 3 days with cold rainwater? And
it was a few years ago. I think it was a couple of weeks.
It's tougher, so it'll be longer, I guess.
Yeah, but there's as I say, that Harvest magazine a couple of years ago had a really good. That's what I based it on. But
Okay.
And I've got a little bit more information here for you that might be useful from Lynette. It's also possible to use river she oak, the Casuarina cunninghamia, or bull oak, the Aloe-Casuarina, also test me, Louis-Armani. This must be the male plant only, distinguished by rusty red or brown flowers, as opposed to the large flowers and subsequent seed cones of the female plant. Collect the ends of branches and make it in the same way as Equisetum tea. This may not be as effective as Equisetum, so if using the Casuarina, make it up to a stronger dilution by using twice the amount of Casuarina.
Okay, thank you for that.
So that might be helpful. And there's also a couple of other recipes just to confuse everybody completely. So the one in the Willada book, you use 50 to 100 grams or 2 to 4 ounces of fronds in 1 to 3 litres or of rainwater. Bring to the boil, cover and simmer for about 30 minutes, then remove from the heat, still with the lid on, leave to cool. Strain off the pale yellow, green or brown Equisetum concentrate. To make the spray, dilute 1 part of Equisetum to 40 parts of water and then dynamizing for 15 to 20 minutes. This helps the tea stick to the plants and makes the treatment more effective. Pour the tea into a garden sprayer and using a fine setting, apply directly to the crops, misting upper and lower leaf sides. Spray at 2-week intervals unless heavy rain is forecast. Equisetum 508 tea may be used in tandem or mixed with other sprays like oak bark, detoxion, and tree paste, which both have disease suppressing effects. And then there's
that recipe, Christine's pretty much speaks of using it like a fungal spray with complete coverage. That it speaks of it like using it as an antifungal spray with complete coverage of foliage.
Yeah. And then there's another alternative method, making a fermented tea that Lynette makes, and that's using 1 unit of shredded horsetail, which is about 300 grams by volume and 50 grams by weight. Bring to the boil in 4.5 litres of good quality water and simmer for 1 hour. Let it cool and transfer to a crock or other storage container with a loose fitting lid. Store this in a cool place, for example, a basement, and allow to ferment for 10 to 14 days until the characteristic smell described by Callisto develops. Thereafter, strain the remaining herb particles out and store in a glass container in a cool, dark place until ready to use. It can be stored for 6 months without losing its effectiveness. To use, add 2 litres of the fermented tea to 20 litres of good quality water. Stir for 20 minutes in the biodynamic fashion. Use to treat up to 1.5 acres. 1 unit of horsetail can thereby treat up to 3 acres with as powerful effect as can be achieved by the fresh tea recipe on only 1 acre. The ratio for diluting is 1 part fermented tea to 9 parts water, and the fermented 508 most likely should be applied as a soil spray, whereas the fresh tea version is most likely the form to use in a foliar spray. Anybody tried that?
But that's what Jeremy was saying that he did when he got mildew on the leaves, sprayed it as a foliar spray.
Yeah. So, then there's another interesting recipe here. It's so make the Equisetum decoction and pour it into a bucket with or without straining off the fronds. Cover with sacking and leave it to ferment for 3 to 10 days in a warm place. 2 weeks later, there should be mold on the surface that indicates that your liquid manure concentrate is ready for use. It will smell quite sulfury, especially if the Equisetum fronds were left in the liquid using the fermenting process. To extend the life of your liquid manure concentrate mother, simply top it up from time to time with fresh Equisetum Avensa 508 tea. So then when you want to use that, to dilute the concentrate, allow 1 part of Equisetum to 5 to 19 parts of water. Dynamize the solution by stirring for 15 to 20 minutes. And then use the Equisetum manure 508 as a fine mist on plants, also as a soil drench applied with a watering can. It is a very helpful preemptive measure 2 to 3 days before perigee or full moon, when watery lunar forces are strong. You can also mix the 508 with stinging nettle liquid manure to produce a spray that cleanses and stimulates the soil. I might be able to.
Which book is that?
This is the Biodynamic Garden, the Wallada one, the Monty Walden one.
Oh, okay.
This one.
Does anyone know why you stir it for 20 minutes?
Jupiter rhythm?
20 minutes is what it takes for a microbe to reproduce 1 generation to the next.
Oh, really?
Which is what I found interesting with what Sina said for 500 at the right temperature, 38 degrees, and stirring for an hour, is that you've got 3 generations of microbes reproducing to such an extent that after 1 hour, you can't get enough oxygen into the water for the next generation of microbes because they've gone from 1 million to 1 billion to 1 trillion microbes into that water. And so therefore then they start reducing or they start becoming asphyxiated, which I find is interesting then that when you look at stirring CPP, you've already energized that water, the CPP, the microbes in that CPP with the basalt in the eggshell, so it only takes 1 generation to bring it back again. So with the Equisetum, as she's describing in that Vallada book on how to do it, then that's why we do it for 20 minutes. is to bring that generation alive again.
Uh-huh.
So you're talking about biology being. So you're talking about there's a biology factor in the Equisetum.
Well, this is when they were talking about having the mold growing on the top of it. They're trying to bring that back into a life again. But it sounded quite complicated, really. As Jeremy says, you know, cook it up and use it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Keep life simple.
For those people that like alternative recipes, then we're giving you lots of choice today.
Yeah.
Nicola?
And not to overthink it. Just go and do it.
Yeah.
Was it Tanya who doesn't have the camera on with the accent?
No, it's Matty.
Matty, where do you live?
Sorry. I live in Northland, Matapuri.
Okay. So, like, again, you would have Equisetum growing up there, but down in the gullies or beside the riverbanks.
Okay. We had a lot on I'm from France, as you can tell from my accent, maybe. And over there it was indeed a weed. I remember my father was market gardener and was fighting them. But now I finally understand the power of it. I'm like, what a shame we were fighting it. We could have used it then.
Who in France?
That was in the north, next to Lille.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, any questions? Anybody? Any clarity? I've got one more tree washing with Equisetum and BD 500 to share with you if not, just to confuse you all and fill up a whole recipe book with what to use Equisetum for.
Is the association selling Equisetum?
We are, yes. It is available in 25 grams, or is it 20 grams, Simon? Lots.
25.
Yeah.
And where are you sourcing that from?
It's a local Hawke's Bay source.
Yeah, Peter Backus had somewhere that he discovered that I'm not sure who's gathering it, but and
Because back in Gita's time, she would know that it used to come from down the west coast. Is that right, Gita? Are you still there?
she might have gone to her tango class.
Yeah, no, she's gone. She's gone. Yeah, she's gone on.
She does tango and salsa dancing on a Thursday night. So
oh my goodness me, that's what Equisetum does to the ground. It makes it tango.
There we go. There we go. See?
Doesn't it?
Yes. So moving on from the tango. So there's another, this might be useful for your trees, Jan, but anyway, this is a good option. Tree washing with Equisetum tea and BD 500. This tree wash is used as a foliar spray to reduce fungus development, especially during a wet season when damping off or mildew can occur. Equisetum arvensa contains a protective factor against fungus infection. This washing of the tree is recommended in all cases where the tree has a lot of loose peeling bark, split bark or bleeding lesions from pruning or breaking off branches, and is especially recommended if the tree is covered with mold, mildew, lichen or moss. This tree wash is made with Equisetum tea and BD 500, as the BD 500 stimulates the growth and renewal of the cambium, as well as doing this for the roots of the tree when sprayed on the soil. And you make it by mixing the Equisetum tea diluted 10:1 and BD 500 in rainwater, stir for 20 minutes again, spray into the tree so the solution covers the entire trunk and branches.
Great.
So there we go. Lots of things that you can do with Equisetum, as you say, James. You know, we could tell lots of conventional farmers about this wonderful so-called weed.
Well, yes, and like the grapevines that we see, not so much at Jeremy's vineyard, but elsewhere, that I don't know what you think, Simon, in Central Otago, but you look at the bark of these grapevines, and it's very, what's the word? It's very hard. The bark is not nice and soft and encapsulating the trunk of the vine. It's flaky, and so when
It
you're
is
talking,
very flaky and can get under the fingernails too. It's quite sharp.
yeah. So therefore, what you're saying here is the Equisetum in 500. One would question whether it'd be easy to use CPP and Equisetum to spray on the trunks of your plum tree, Jan, or you know, the orange trees, just on the trunk.
Yeah, I think it's been very wet the last couple of seasons, so and I'm pretty sure I got some sort of fungus from the neighbours that went onto my grape, because that was badly infected last year.
It's in the air. It's not just from your neighbours.
Yeah, Jan, don't you dare blame your misfortunes on your neighbours.
Your neighbour's fault.
I
Jan.
am.
As a biodynamic grower, you get given heaps from all your neighbours because you don't attend to anything, and yet you stop and think about it and listen to what it is that you're doing. And why should you get blamed for having fungus transporting it to the neighbours? For goodness sake, it's.
Are there any other questions from anybody that hasn't asked anything, or?
Can we go? We've got to go and put the cows away too. So.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, good.
If
Just with the ferment, as I understand, the ferment process is more for storage, increases the potency, length of potency out to sort of that 6 month, aren't you saying? Whereas the tea is normally only, like they say, maybe six weeks or something like that.
Yeah, so it's a shorter term, although I did keep some in my fridge for some time. I mean, who can tell whether it still works or not, but it seemed to. But I think also the ferment, you can cover a broader area, 3 acres versus 1 acre. So I suppose it's that concentrate, and then it would be really interested to see about that D5 that you were talking about, where could that go?
And talking about with the potent, trying to measure the potency, has anyone done any further work since the conference with Vida Austin's water crystallization with preps and stuff?
Good point.
Yeah, not with Equisetum. We have done some with the 500, but yeah, I mean, she will turn up at some point and we'll organise a workshop. I mean, she talked about coming here and putting stuff through my little flow form, but it could be anybody's flow form, and then trying to sort of do the frozen petri dish thing to sort of start to look at is there any connections. But yeah, she's on a big tour overseas at the moment, so that might be next year before we get to do that, but great idea.
And also out of the back end of the frost, the first couple of spring frosts we went through, Mark did have a brilliant idea of he crystallized some valerian and then passed that around for people to then crystallize off to see if that actually had an effect, an energetic effect of valerian into a spray form by crystallization. It was a total out there sort of idea, but yeah, the world's our oyster.
Yeah, we bought some petri dishes, but we've only done tree paste. We put some of it tree paste on, and it was not being able to read it properly. It was full of so many different things. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? She's got down, reading the symbols and the lines and the everything's, and that's obviously going to take a little bit of time to work that out. But I guess if there's a consistency, not that there is, because every day is different, but that'd be great if people took up doing that. I think that could, it's a bit like the chromatography photos. They can show so much, and for people who aren't familiar with more of the unseen etheric realms, it's a wonderful way to show what's living there.
I've been doing a bit of the crystal, and I was thinking I was going to give those a go, so you might inspire me. I'll have a go with the Equisetum. I'm going to make up and see.
I will too. I've been doing her work every day, so I've been getting some
have you?
new things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
What have you
Right.
discovered, Jan?
Pardon?
What have you discovered so far?
Oh, well, I did a biodynamic one today, and it was really interesting. Lots of circles all over it, which means resonance. It's a good sign anyway.
Water, or was it one of the preps?
It was actually just water, but yeah, I will do the Equisetum because I'm going to do.
Well, there's a little research project, everyone. So I found something interesting, which was also part of the 508, going back to the observation of lunar influences. So I thought we could perhaps finish with some interesting little observations, unless there's any other questions or people want to ask anything further.
No.
Right, and then
Close
we
off.
can go home and have some dinner.
It was very informative. Thank you.
Oh, it was great. It's been great. So this is also from Lynette's work, but I'm just trying to think. Some of it's from Sensitive Chaos, from Schwenk's work, and some of it is Steiner. So this is Theodore Schwenk's observations. In olden times, these lunar rhythms were taken into account when wells were dug. This was usually done only during certain phases of the moon and when it was in certain positions in the zodiac. Within the earth, water rises and falls within the course of the moon. Recent observations in deserted and flooded mines show how the subterranean water reservoirs are influenced by the rhythms of the moon. So that's one observation. Next one. Traditional customs amongst lumbermen to the effect that the rivers spread out at full moon and burrow in the depths at new moon, showing that the forms of movement within the water obviously have a particular connection with the course of the moon and its phases. In naturally flowing rivers, it is difficult to float the logs at full moon as they are washed up on the banks, whereas at new moon they are drawn into the middle of the waterway and are thus easier to control. It is gradually becoming evident that observations like this from everyday experience in the past are not to be put aside lightly. Lumbermen also reckon with the change in the stream of sap during the year that the stream of sap in the trees varies according to the phases of the moon and its position in the zodiac, and so accordingly does the durability and quality of the timber. Timber felled at new moon in the winter is the most durable, and to this day in South America, valuable hardwoods are stamped with marks indicating the phase of the moon at which they were felled. Their commercial value is determined accordingly.
And you can buy wine barrels now made of oak trees that have been felled and treated in the lunar phase.
Ah, can you? And would that same indication apply, do you think?
Absolutely. You get the drying tannin because the cells aren't filled up with moisture so much. And of course, they've been dried for 3 years.
Yeah. And so that would impact the wine as well,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah. Oh, good. And then just a final finishing off, the influence of the moon on plants. This is Steiner. As I've said before, we usually imagine that the moon simply takes up the rays of the sun and reflects them onto the earth. In other words, when we consider the effects of the moon, we usually only think of the sunlight. But that is not the only thing that comes towards the earth. Along with the moonbeams, the entire reflected cosmos comes towards the earth. The moon reflects everything that comes toward it. In a certain sense, the whole starry heavens are reflected by the moon and stream towards the earth, although you couldn't prove it by any physical means available at present. It is indeed a very powerful organizing force that radiates down from the moon into the plants, so that the plants are also enabled to form seeds, so that the force of growth can be enhanced to become the force of reproduction. I think that's probably all I need to read of that. So there we go. phases, observation, watery realms, 508, biodynamic preparations.
Can I give you a parting verse?
Why not?
May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on. That's Equisetum.
Very good. Thank you. So thank you everybody for turning up, and hopefully that was lots of information for you.
Thank you.
By Jeff. You know,
Thanks.
just see how
Thank you very
go
much.
with trying those two. Thank you, James and Jeremy in particular, and everybody else who contributed. And
Thank you.
maybe we'll see you again, or maybe
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Simon, and then right. Well, if that was the finale, we captured some really good and that to bring all of that.
There we go. You're still there? I can hear you, I think.
Yep, still there. I'll just okay. I'll just stop the
Recording.
Good.
There you go.